Well, hello, everybody. First of all, thank you for joining us today. We've got a great turnout of people that are joining us on this webinar, so thank you for joining us. I think more will come on in a few minutes, but collectively, we just wanted to take a few minutes and talk about how the Belton community is addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that it's affecting everybody and affecting lots of industries. We thought this would just be a great time to get together and to share some insight from some different leaders in the business, and then also give you guys also a time for some Q&A. I'm going to ask that you're going to be muted. Everybody's going to be muted except the panelists, and Michael from NIBA will be taking the questions. So please use your questions through the chat sessions. Mike will be collecting those, and at the end, we're going to try to get to as many of those questions as we possibly can, depending on where we are from a time limit. And so that's the kind of logistics, and we'll get rolling. I'd like to take a few minutes, first of all, and just introduce the panelists that we have today. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your willingness to spend some time with us and just talking about some of the stuff that's going on in our industries right now. First, we have Tom Wiak. Tom is the president of Flexco. As many of you know, Flexco provides products and services that maximize conveyor belt uptime. Headquarters in Downers Grove, Illinois, with 9 subsidiary locations and customers in more than 150 countries. So Tom has been active in the National Industrial Belting Association for many years and served as president in 2014. We also have Tim Shaw. Tim is the president and CEO of Almex Group. Many of us know them as the Shaw Almex from a branding standpoint. Currently located in Decatur, Georgia, with 18 locations and customers across 123 countries. Almex is one of the leading manufacturers of conveyor belt vulcanizing equipment and supports all aspects of conveyor system setup. Tim, thank you for joining us. We also have Brian Schochner. Brian is the president of Vaughn Belting Company and the immediate past president of NIBA. Vaughn Belting is a regional fabricator and distributor of industrial belts and belting supplies in north part of South Carolina, with customers across the nation and internationally. Vaughn has been in the business since 1928, and I believe Brian is either a 3rd or 4th generation Schochner in the belting business. We also have Ken Engelsman, the president of Belt Service Corporation, headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri, with 11 global locations and a global network of industrial distributors and original equipment manufacturers from all over the world. Belt Service field representatives work hard hand in hand with distributors and offer a wide range of light and medium duty products. Company is known as its 4th generation of family leadership, with Ken serving as the current president. And then we also have Bill Thaman. He's the president of Thaman Rubber Company in Cincinnati, Ohio. Founded in 1960, this business began in a home. I believe it was Tom's father, and today has grown the business into a very nice business. 120,000 square feet, featuring multiple slitters, field vulcanizers, and capabilities to do very heavy duty belts wherever you might need them. So once again, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to jump right into some of the questions. The format's going to be, I'm just going to ask some questions, and I'm going to ask each one of you, grab one of you and ask you to kind of lead it off, and then if somebody else has some additional information, please feel free to jump in and join it. So I guess one of the questions that comes up during this time where there's lots of change going on is what are you prioritizing in the short term to maintain the relationship with your customers? And I'm gonna start with Tim on that, if I could. Tim, are you there?
You're still muted.
Well, Ken, why don't I jump over to Ken? Ken, maybe you can jump in on that and some of the things that Belt Service is doing to maintain the relationship with the customers. And then Tim will get unmuted and you can jump in a minute.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting times where pretty dramatic shift pretty quickly in a lot of ways. So you mentioned in your intro, Belt Service, we have well over 20 who's really, you know, obviously graphics people, our products, and, you know, with the goal being, you know, probably anywhere from 10 to 14 nights out a month, you know, interfacing, interacting with customers and sales calls, joint calls in the field, doing post-sale support, and obviously all that did. So, and I give them credit to our sales for adapting. It's still available and contacting their customers via phones and other means. But one of the things we kind of put into was just a lot of online sort of seminars and trainings, not unlike this, where we talked about sort of product ability. Half of those, a little more than half, were probably really for the benefit of the customer and learn a little bit about health service things. Because in addition to us, there's a lot of other salespeople for our distributor customers, particularly, who are probably to utilize their time. And then probably internally is around certain softwares we're using internally, CRM, business reporting, things like that really enhance. Then some. We feel for 1 month of this, really, we've been able to keep our guys pretty engaged. And the challenge is, what does this look like going forward?
Okay.
So yeah, others on the panel have to say. So
yeah, I'm going to jump over to Tim. Ken, you are breaking up a little bit on us, but let me jump over to Tim. And Tim, maybe you can also expand on what some things that Almex is doing to maintain the relationships with the customers right now.
Yeah, John, one of the things that think we've all become is masters of over the internet communications, which beforehand we did some, but I've now got passwords to Zoom and to Teams and to Skype and every other kind of multimedia thing going forward. The bad news is it now means you can be on calls almost 24 hours a day, sitting at your desk or in your kitchen. But we're finding that reaching out to customers and just sharing with them a little bit what's going on. We've been talking about how we've been impacted by deliveries. We have about 4,000 different parts that go into what we manufacture and do. And maintaining that supply chain has been very, very difficult on a global basis because of everything from containers not moving and ships not moving. So we've been doing a lot more webinars. We're starting to deliver training programs over the internet as opposed to at our school. And we're also running some promotions right now with our customers where they buy products and will contribute to the local hospital or to PPE in their local community, allowing them to get involved during the crisis and not only being involved with our products, but also being involved in their community. And I think the other thing is we're starting to take more of an effort to communicate on a weekly basis to our customer base, which we wouldn't normally do. It would be much more infrequent, but we've stepped it up an awful lot in the last little while. Okay,
great. Interesting comment on the supply chain side of it, because you think about how we're taking care of our customers, but some of that's being affected by the stuff that's coming in, and how do we get stuff. So great perspective on that. I'm sure everybody's dealing with some of that. Is there anybody else that has anything that's rather unique of what you're doing to maintain a relationship with any customers that you want to jump in on?
Well, one of the things that we did, we had one of our chemical suppliers who switched their manufacturing over from what they normally make dust suppressants to instead they're manufacturing hand sanitizer. And okay. I joked with them that they really wanted me to take it. And I thought, well, yeah, we'll take a couple of pallets. Now we're on truckload number 3.
Okay.
I had no idea what the demand was going to be to try and help these people out, but it's been a great way to stay in touch with people.
There's going to be hand sanitizers passed out at the convention, I bet, this year, a little more than normal. Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to shift over to, there's been quite a few comments that people have been discussing a little bit the impact of the CARES Act from a federal government, at least in the United States. I know we have a lot of U.S. members, so we'll take a couple minutes and talk about that. And then maybe, Tim, if there's something going on in Canada, maybe you can help us too. But I'm going to direct this to Tom Weak. How do you think the CARES Act is applicable to some of our members? And would you give any of them advice on what they maybe should or shouldn't do?
Yeah, thanks, John. It's actually a bit late in the game, at least for what the government's done, the U.S. government's done from a CARES Act. Probably the two main parts that are applicable to NIBA members are the payroll tax deferral. If you have not looked into that, I definitely encourage that. That'll at least allow you to defer your Social Security contributions for your employees over the course of the next couple of years. So it's a small help, but I think any help for cash flow right now is a good thing. The bigger part certainly got a lot more press, and it's come in 2 rounds, is the PPP, the Payroll Protection Act, or Paycheck Protection Act. It was originally little under 350 billion, and the federal government approved another 320 billion, so close to 650 billion US dollars in total. And that second round opened up earlier this week. So if you have not taken advantage of that, I can't comment on if any is available, because it was first come, first serve. But that's a big help for those of you to preserve employment. It's really based on a payroll calculation, and it's intended to cover up to 8 weeks of your payroll costs. But it can also be used to cover mortgages, rent, utilities, and a few other things. The debt is forgivable. At least that's the way it was advertised. I know there's been some further comments by our Commerce Secretary about how the federal government's going to approach that. But I think there's a lot yet to be determined on how companies are going to use that funding, and how accountable the federal government is going to hold them in terms of using that. But I would just encourage, if you have not explored that, read up on it, talk to your accountant, your lawyer, or your banker. They can bring you up to speed, and it can provide at least a little bit of short-term cash relief, and hopefully help you through any cash flow challenges. The last part that's still in play, and it's really not part of the CARES Act, but it's a program called the Main Street Lending Program. It's really directed directly from the Federal Reserve. They had announced some basic information, I think it was a few weeks ago, and just today released a little bit more information. And so this Main Street Lending Program is really pure loans. They're not forgivable. It's not intended to be forgivable, but it really targets mid-sized companies. So companies under 15,000 employees and less than 5 billion in revenues in 2019. There were some lower limits on the PPP Act. The PPP was intended for employers with less than 500 employees. So the Main Street Lending Program is for larger companies, although smaller companies can apply too. Right now, what the Fed has described as a program that would provide low interest loans as low as $500,000 and up to $25 million. And those would come with some restrictions on the use of the cash and some other restrictions for the borrower. So the Fed is expected to release some more details on that shortly. But again, I would just try to look that up, talk to your accountant or your banker, and see if it applies to you, because they're both programs are really intended to help businesses, both large and small, like the ones that are NIBA members. I will hand it over to my good friend Tim Shaw to talk about programs that are available to Canadian companies.
So thanks, Tom. One of the things that the government has done up here is there's the same thing, a similar wage subsidy program, that the goal behind it is to keep as many people employed as possible. And we're suffering from sort of the same similarities you guys are, as far as the system being overloaded and not being able to access it as freely as you should be able to. We haven't had the funding issues of the money running out and having to be resupplied. We've been printing money for a lot longer than you guys have, and so there's a big whack of paper in a warehouse somewhere. They have done some really good things. So on what we have up here is a thing called Business Development Corp and BDC Bank. If people aren't familiar with it, it's providing working capital loans up to $6 million for basically enterprises that fit into the normal NIBA constituency. And they're processing a lot faster and a lot quicker. It's more efficiently. We tend to have a little bit more on the wage subsidy. We do not have the deferral programs on the taxes and so forth. It really is more of a keep people at work for up to 3 months and sort of a forgivable as well. So mirrors an awful lot. I think we're taking a lot of cues from what you guys are doing, but they're working mostly through EDC and BDC, which are two government sort of quasi entities. The chartered banks are not really getting involved the way the Bank of America or the other banks are. You're not accessing it through them. But there is a huge program, and there is a centralized website under Canadian government you can go to that will give you a lot of information. And then on internationally, there's a lot of stuff going on as well, but not nearly as professionally well done or being done at other operations. I think you guys would all share the same thing. We're not seeing those things happening in Latin America or Europe the way they are here. So, John, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Tom, maybe just expand a little bit more on the PPP. What's your understanding with your staffing if you're applying for that? Do you have any relationships to understanding? One of the questions that we're seeing on the side is, how does that affect your staffing? My understanding is you have to try to keep your staff. That's the intent, right?
That is the intent, is to either keep them or hire them back within the 8-week eligibility period. I think the question that was asked is if you decide to go to a 4-day work week, how does that work? I think what the government is expecting is that there will be some type of audit process at the end of the 8-week program where really you can apply the funds to the payroll costs that you have during the eligibility period, 8-week eligibility period. So let's say a manufacturer or a distributor reduces work hours, but they still maintain their heads. They would only be eligible for the amount of payroll that they've paid over that 8-week period. So if you've reduced it, let's say by 1 day out of 5, we go to a 4-day work week, you may only be eligible for 80% of the amount that you've requested in the original PPP program, and you would be responsible for paying the remainder back. That's where the question comes in, just how the government's going to enforce the forgivability element of the loans. There seems to be a lack of clarity there, but I believe that's how it works. Again, I would encourage you to reach out to an accountant if you have a relationship with a reliable accountant and get their advice as well. Yeah,
and from my understanding, most big banks are offering this program through the PPP. They can either the bank that you typically work with or most big banks. I think some people are wondering what banks should they go to if they haven't already. But to my understanding, it's most banks, and for sure the big ones.
I think big and small, John. To be honest, our experience is actually we've had better, more fruitful conversations with the smaller banks. I think they're really in tune with the target audience for this program, which is companies under 500 employees. So the small banks, at least in the U.S., really have a good grasp of it.
Great. Okay. If we get some more questions about that, Michael, maybe we can answer them later. But we'll move on to another one, and it really relates to some of this because we talked about keeping our staff or not keeping our staff. But I'll shift this over to you, Brian. Like, how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted your workforce? And maybe you can just expand on that a little bit.
Okay, thank you, John. So for us, we were late, and I say late in relative terms to the social distancing and whatnot, because we are a small business, and we spend a lot of time close together, whether it's our office staff or the shop. We have 6 in the office and 7 in our shop. So we started doing a little more cleaning, a little more things that we didn't typically do as much of. But everyone here has been healthy. The one thing we did do to try and help the staff is we started a 4-day week for all the people here in the office and shop. They either take a Monday or Friday off. We paid them so that they wouldn't feel like they were out and not being paid. But the idea was they stay home, rest, keep up their immune system so that when they're here, we continue to stay healthy. The other thing we asked them to do is, because through the course of this whole thing, we've all come to work, we were going back to our families, shopped when necessary, but try not to come in contact with people they hadn't already been in contact with. And it seems to be working. We're going to keep that in place through the end of May, which, a 3-day weekend every week is pretty good, especially if you're getting paid for it. And so far it's been successful. So that's what we're doing. And hopefully it'll make sure things are leveled out and we don't have anybody get sick.
How about your sales force, Brian? How's it affecting your sales force and what they're able to do or not do?
Initially, and still have kind of told them to do so. We said, let's shelter at home and only go out when required. And because we are an essential business and, we're in a lot of different industries, we've made a lot of calls. A lot of you guys online probably know Tom Archer. He had to make a run this week through some people that really need to see him. And frankly, he was glad to get out of the house. The other guys, and I've got 6 guys out there, they've gone as needed. And what they do is, we've got face masks, we've got gloves, and they're only doing what required. But our business has dropped off maybe a little bit, but we're seeing enough activity, and we're getting a lot of things done. So I'm hoping this is just a blip on the map for all of us when we get back at it.
Okay. Anybody else have any impact to the workforce? Maybe Ken. I think Ken, we had a little bit of a sound issue with you earlier. Let's try that again.
Is my audio coming through? Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think, we've had similar things. We haven't quite given a full day off every week, but, we do have, obviously everyone's had to adopt the expectation. So, where we can, a lot of our office employees have been working from home. That transition going pretty well. So, and then, the direct shop we have here and at our location, for those who don't fall in one of the sort of the CARES Act classifications, whether you're exposed to COVID-19 or you're at home caring for a child who's under the age of 18, but are just uncomfortable coming to work at this time, we're allowing people to take a very extended leave of absence, just to field protection. We early on, we had more people manage that. We're almost probably at the point where people are back to work.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ken. Yeah, we're still breaking up a little bit, so we'll try to see if we can get that a little bit more corrected between now and then. And I know that Ken mentioned, leave of absence and in the workforce. And so, Bill, maybe you can just expand, what has Thaman had to do to adjust any of their leave of absence policies or working from home? Are there any creative ways that your companies are adjusting to leave of absence policies related to time off or teleworking?
Regarding the creative part of this, with the leave of absence, the first thing that we're really just trying to keep ourselves in compliance with what the government is requiring right now. It has definitely changed what we have to offer. We have had a few people who've had to take advantage of it, either because they've had children that are off, they're off from school, so they have to stay home, or maybe there's someone else in their family who's been ill, and so they're caring for them. We have not had anyone in our particular, in any of our locations who has been diagnosed, so we've avoided that. Okay. Telework has been an adventure for us. Probably like a lot of other people, we thought we had plenty of bandwidth, and we found out we didn't have plenty of bandwidth for everyone that we were sending home. But we've adjusted to that, and I think people they've gotten better at it every day as we've moved on. As far as, if they do take a leave of absence, things like, we require them to have a doctor's note to come back, because we are determined to delay this as long as we can before it really affects our business. If you're leaving your home state, whatever it might be, for whatever reason, we ask them to assure that they're not in a hot spot before they come back to work, to be respectful of everyone else who is working here. And we've had really good, just like Brian, I have to be very thankful for our people, because they've really embraced what needs to be done. It made my life a lot easier. We expect them to take their temperature while they're on leave, so that they monitor what's going on and not just have their temperature taken when they return. And then we're spending a lot of time, my vice president of HR, he's spending a lot of time coaching people through, the proper ways to do this, so that we give them the proper resources, but also so that they're in compliance, so that if they are eligible to be paid, we want to pay them, but we want them to abide by what the laws say.
Okay. I think that's some good advice there. Anybody else any comments? Tom, about anything from a leave of absence? You maybe have a little bit bigger workforce. Anything going on there with you?
I think we're following what the others had mentioned in terms of leaves and trying to encourage just awareness, personal health awareness, and not only of themselves but their families. When they go home and they come back to work, they're bringing that back with them. So they really need to be aware of that. So it's been a big communication effort. The one thing for us, we do operate multiple shifts, is just in the spirit of trying to maintain business continuity, is we've actually separated the two shifts by an hour and a half. And we are very strict about not having people cross over from being in the building during first shift to being in the building in second shift. That way, if there is an incident in any of our facilities on any shifts, it is isolated to that single shift. We're sanitizing our building every morning before the first shift comes in, between the two shifts in that hour and a half, and then after the second shift goes home. And just in an abundance of caution, an abundance of making sure that we're providing a clean and healthy work area, and trying to make sure that if there is an incident, it's not spread between facilities or between shifts. So if you have multiple shift operations, that might be something to consider as well.
I think I've heard that through some other industries where they're splitting the shifts and everybody's got to be out before the next group comes in.
Right.
It probably doesn't matter what size business you have, because the impact could be the same. So.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that Tom brought up. And in our particular case, with multiple locations, we're treating each location as a completely different business, and no one from any other location is allowed in any other building. So if you're from Louisville, you're not coming into the Cincinnati facility, and vice versa. Just if we have a problem, we want to isolate it.
Yeah, John, we've also gone to just even on existing shifts where lunch hours are staggered. So everybody's not in the lunchroom congregating at the same time. We split up into 3 different groups, and we've also had people go to different shifts that are odd shifts. The people have very severe family issues, people with immune diseases in their family. Okay. So they've gone to isolating themselves almost like there's 2 or 3 just on a special shift by themselves, because for them it's devastating, but by the same token, they can't afford to not be working. So it's been kind of a plant by plant basis, but yeah, we're doing the same things that Tom's doing within a shift, sort of juggling it a little bit as well.
Okay. Well, a lot of different ideas and creative ideas. Ken, I'm just going to jump over to you just to see, because I know you switched your sound system. Do you want to just say a couple things and either on this topic or just,
I mean, we can move on, I think, but can you hear me better now, or is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's better. So perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
And then this parlays off some of that, because it really links to, maybe we've already talked about a little bit from a safety standpoint, if there's any new safety measures in your office shop or your installers or your sales team. And Tim, you started to talk about some of that, but is there anything else additional that we would need to know about from a safety measure standpoint? I think it's great for our members to hear different ideas, and some of them, there's probably lots of them, but maybe we can just run around the room a little bit and talk about some ideas from a safety standpoint that haven't already been mentioned.
Yeah, I think the only other thing we're actually right now trying to airlift in 30,000 masks through our Chinese operations and get them out to our plants, our families, employees, and so forth. And because no matter how long this goes on, it seems there's never enough available. No matter, I'm interested by Bill's comment about truckloads of hand sanitizer. Like, you sort of thought somewhere along the line they would catch up, and it's not. So we're moving towards that everybody has to have PPE on in our shops. We've not been able to access it, but that's what we're trying to get to. And then so much of our staff is on the office side is social distancing. I mean, we have a problem with manufacturing, like many other people in this panel. You can't really have the people stay away. So we're just trying to, and on installers, we don't do that out of North America. So, but those people are grounded. I mean, for people like Tom, I'm sure, and Ken and stuff, you know, the international aspect of not being able to move people around is a real hamper to doing business the way we do internationally.
Tom, you got some feedback on that one?
For sure. I mean, it's you know, the typical international travel interaction support. You know, it's all gone online, and so you know, I think that in the near term, that intimacy and contact suffers a bit, whether it's with colleagues around the world or with customers down the road. But I see a lot of great things from companies in our industry who are engaging in new ways and just being creative about how you maintain those contacts.
And there might even be a time, even through NIBA, that there's people are sharing some resources. Who knows? Just to take care of customers in the long run.
Yep.
I think, Tim, you mentioned the masks, and I hadn't thought about that. But is there anybody else having either challenges getting masks or have a quick fix to where people can get them if they can't get them? Does anybody have anything on that?
Hey, John, I'll share a creative approach we took. And I know we all have them, folks who've worked in our business and might be retired, and we actually reached out to our group of retirees, and I know a number of our folks, they either sew or have a spouse who sews, and we put out the request, and I shouldn't be amazed, but it was heartening to know that that group responded for our employees, and before we knew it, we had hundreds of hand-sewn cloth face coverings. They weren't fancy, but they worked, and if you have some of those folks who've worked for you in the past, reach out to them. They're probably all looking for some things to do and ways to contribute, and it was really heartening.
Great. That's a great story.
Hey, John, I could add something that Bell Service has done that's a little unique. We on the weekends in our production facilities, even though after every shift, we've been doing a lot more cleaning, wiping down of shared surfaces or machineries, but in the weekends, we've been having a local company come in that has these fogger devices that basically kill anything in the air. So on the weekends, we've basically been fogging our offices and our production environments to promote, obviously, a clean environment, a safe environment for our employees to come into. In addition to that, enforcing 6-foot distances, and any doors we can keep propped open, we have, and any doors we cannot, we've sort of installed paper towel dispensers by them so people can just pull a towel to use a door handle or a doorknob. And at the same time, put a lot of dispensers for antibacterial, all around the facility. So at any given time, people can access it. And whether or not these things are fully, it's about creating that sense that this is a safe environment that people feel comfortable coming to. Yep.
Well, none of it can be hurting, right? I mean, it's all got to be helping. So great.
Right.
Anybody else on the safety topic? There's some good stuff going on there.
Okay, I'll just add one other idea. It just Ken sparked the thought. We had a couple of our clever engineers who actually used some of our equipment to make some modified door openers. So if you have a door that you could attach something on the bottom and actually use your foot to open it, or use your a larger hook to use your forearm to open a doorknob, or that might otherwise you would use your hand, just to try to keep hands off of that hardware. Our guys have come up with some clever ideas, and listen, if you folks are interested, we'd be happy to share the ideas so you guys can do it yourself. But they're simple do-it-yourself solutions just to try to promote that sanitary condition and good hygiene practices.
Okay, great ideas.
John, I will add one thing.
Go for it.
John, this is Brian.
Yeah.
We did have a hard time getting hand sanitizer for a while, so we actually bought the ingredients and we mixed some of our own up here. And even now, when we go online, you can't find Purell and some other things, and Clorox wipes and whatnot. So, we're still being creative and trying to make sure we're able to clean stuff and having to do some of our do-it-your-own type materials. I see that Bill might want to send me one of those trucks of hand sanitizer south.
We can do that. We can set 5-gallon pails will be on their way tomorrow. The funny thing that I'll add to that is that my wife is actually making homemade Clorox wipes for us here at the office. So, and they actually work out pretty well if you see the directions online.
Sweet.
Great stuff. Thank you. I'm going to shift gears a little bit towards, as we're going through these times, and we're in some parts of the United States starting to loosen a few things up and maybe at least getting some industry back to work. Just some questions about what we might see the impacts to our industry in the next either 6, 9, or 12 months, and what your perspective on that might be from a projection. And I know that we're not going to hold anybody to it, but just get some opinions of what some of some of the leaders of the business what they see as they're planning for the future. So, Tom, maybe you can start with that one and just give us some thoughts on what Flexco is doing or thinking about, what timeline this might to come out of this.
Yeah, so I guess I've got a couple perspectives I'd share. We like Tim, we have an operation over in China, so it's been interesting to see how that country's handled the situation and where they're at in the cycle. That gives maybe some hope, because those businesses are really back to pretty much normal operations. I know the restrictions in terms of traveling outside of at least some of the major cities like Beijing and Shanghai have been loosened. They have a way of a method of testing and certifying current health conditions. So that model is maybe one to look forward to and hope that there is that availability in North America and in the other regions of the world. But I'll just share my opinion from my economic standpoint. I think this is going to be a long, hard slog for all of us, and I think for a lot of reasons the recovery is going to take a long time. And if I was going to encourage my colleagues in NIBA, just prepare yourself for a long recovery. I think all parts of our global supply chain have to be working at the same time, and to get all those different parts back to some new state of normal is going to be a Herculean effort. And I foresee it taking a long time to get back to normal from a consumer standpoint, from an industrial standpoint. You start looking at commodity prices and just the flow of materials around the world. And anyway, I'm optimistic we will come through it. Yeah. But I'll just share, I'm pessimistic in a short time frame. I think it's going to be a long recovery.
And if you have to say long, just try to put that into your own mind without, I know we can't, none of us can predict, but as long, 2 months, is it 6 months? Is it maybe a year? It's hard to know, right?
I tend to lean more towards a year. I mean, yeah. It's not that we'll be in the doldrums forever, but it'll be a longer time. And really, listen, it really depends on how countries are able to handle testing, tracing, and treatment. It all depends on those three things. And if you listen to the scientists, they really focus on those three. So until we as a country, as a continent, as a global society, get our arms around those, until we get those done, we will be constantly in the shadow of this virus.
Anybody else dare to venture what their perspective on what the business might be? Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. Like I said, nobody can hold anybody to this. We're just trying to get a feel for, as we're closer to our industry, what might be going on. So, anybody else?
John, I think we're looking at this, I think, probably well into probably 2022 before we see any kind of real normalcy, in our opinion, of where it's going, because it's such a networked world. I mean, in the good old days, a lot of us have some gray hair. We remember that, 20 years ago, you couldn't just jump on the internet and buy anything anywhere. So I think this is something where we see a true sort of normalized situation. It's at least 18 months out down the road. And part of the issues like in China, like Tom was saying, our plant's back up and running. But the difference is they suspend civil liberties a lot more than what we're prepared to accept here in North America. So they're prepared to, enforce things that our staff and our factory has to do that we would never accept over here. And a lot of those countries have got a better handle on it, South Korea, Singapore, China. It's because they can be more invasive into people's liberties that I just don't think we're willing to accept here in North America. So we may have a little bit longer path to get there. And certainly I think for those people that are looking to either import products from overseas or people who are exporting product, there's such a mess right now in the container ships and ships that are offshore, and the container industry is just hemorrhaging. They're bleeding money all over the place. So the follow of that is when we all get back to going back to business again, will all the supply chain, will all those other things be able to support what we all hope is going to happen? That's going to be an interesting question.
Good perspective.
Yeah. John, I think I'll add, what makes this so hard to assess really is there's still a fair amount of, there's not a lot of clarity really on where this is going. I mean, we've been in this economic lockdown and really to get probably a better understanding, but you do know as you lighten restrictions, there's probably going to be some element of this coming back, a second wave. How does that get reacted to? I think the other thing to look at is it's really a, regional or an industry specific in some ways. I mean, obviously different regions of the United States have been impacted differently. New York City in that area is far more impacted than many other states, and that'll probably play a direct role in how quickly these areas rebound and can get back to normal, quote unquote, whatever normal may look like going forward until there is a vaccine, which may or may not even come to fruition. So, it's just about understanding maybe your markets where you are. And certainly anyone with significant exposure to oil and gas right now or energy is probably facing an even far more severe recovery timeline. So it's a difficult question, and there's a lot of different aspects floating out to take into consideration.
And if you were going to take that another step, like how to continue to engage with customers, and how do you see doing your business differently, can you maybe give us some ideas? Have you thought about that? And do you have any thoughts on what you guys might be having to do different? Obviously, we talked about the technology already, where, having 4 different means of media ways to connect. But Ken, anything that you can think of that?
Yeah, I think, when you kind of position your business around maybe the idea of customer intimacy and being a close partner and having field guys and really sort of interacting and engage with the distributor network. Yeah, I mean, how that works going forward. I mean, I think this concept that maybe come July, everyone just be back to getting in their cars and making their trips is probably unrealistic at this point. So it's how do we adapt? How do we use technology? How do we still engage with the customers to find out really what their pain points are, how we can help them and do it in a new way. I mean, obviously we're still available, our guys, to get out and make field calls and do some support. Like Brian alluded to, Tom Archer had done that. We've had some guys do that, but at the same time, I think, even going into food facilities and what's going on with Tyson and these other facilities might be far more restrictive to do that kind of support. So I'm interested in what the panelists have to say. It's interesting to see what this new normal and dynamic looks like as we emerge from these lockdowns.
Yeah, any thoughts from anybody else on what the future might look like, on how we go to market or deal with our customers?
John, I'll kick in. I think we're learning a lot about ourselves. You're seeing what your sales staff does in tight times or hard times. How they're interacting with their existing customer base. You've got to be able to take a hold of the customers you have and expand what you're doing. And I think that, and along with the training, and by the way, I want to thank all those that have been doing the webinars. My guys have participated in a lot of them. So, you get to kind of reinvent yourself as far as your knowledge or refresh what you already know. But so we're going to take this, and hopefully when we come out of this thing, and in South Carolina's, we never really shut it down all the way, like some people did. But the automotive industry is opening back up next week, which we have a lot of second-tier people around here that participate in that. But some of our other customers are already running. We're going to be there for them, and hopefully all of the guys and members of NIBA and other companies are doing the same thing, so that when we are back out there, we're all doing a good job for the customers that need us.
Good. Anybody else?
For us, I think one of the things that's going to be apparent going forward is our partners with our manufacturing partners like Flexco, like Belt Service out there. We're running into issues where our customers only want so many people on site. So I'm pretty adamant that if we're going to send a manufacturer, then we need to put forth our efforts also, and our people need to be there. We're having situations where we're sending the manufacturer in directly, and we are just being the organizer of it. So I think those partnerships are going to become more and more important. And especially, I'm of the opinion that COVID is going to, it's not over with. It's going to, even once we reopen, it's going to reappear along the way and shut things down and reopen. And it's not going to be a nice, pretty event that we're going to have over the next year.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it's going to have an impact, not just from the COVID, but other flus and that kind of stuff. I think we're going to learn a lot. And I think we're going to, hopefully for the better, but the new norm is going to be different. And I think, it could have other positive impacts on some of those other, whether it's the common cold or the flu, who knows what going forward. So.
It's been great on selling expenses and travel expenses. So.
Yeah.
There.
Which really leads to another question is, what are some of the, has anybody made any outside of what's been regulated, but any travel restrictions or travel policies or plans that they see in the future are going to be different? Brian, I don't know if you, with your 6
Yeah, well, I'm regional, so my guys, we cover the Carolinas and a little bit of Tennessee, Virginia, and North Georgia, but we're pretty much driving most of the way, so we're not changing a whole lot there. So for us, it's just going to be until all the companies open back up fully, where we can go, just head out and make the calls. We're going to kind of pinpoint where we go.
Okay.
And I imagine some of my colleagues here, that have to fly a lot of places, that's where it's really going to get interesting is, when do you let them go and who's comfortable getting on that plane and, all those things. And I know, if you read everything, it scares the heck out of you, but it's got to be smart. Masks, gloves, and just do things a little differently. And, I'm an optimist. I'm an eternal optimist. So I think that we're going to get there, and it's just how quick we get there.
Yeah. I think I've heard some international, some different countries that have put some policies in place, or like if you travel outside the country, when you come back, you got to quarantine yourself for a certain number of weeks. Well, for, not just for the next month, that could go on for another year, 6 or 7 months, which is a big change. So anybody else with any, from an international or just from a domestic traveling policy that you see some changes?
John, we have a customer of ours. It's a service company up in British Columbia, and they were having to do work up in the Yukon and up in northern area. And the problem they had was the guys flew in and flying back out, crossing borders and stuff. They were in a 2-week quarantine. Well, for any of us, having service personnel that are sitting in a hotel room or sitting at home, forced quarantine, unable to be billed or be able to work. That's none of our organizations can kind of take that thing where we got people on the bench. We're paying them, we're not billing them out, because that's a lot of people are built on a service model. So anytime, and I know we actually had to have some people try and travel from Atlanta down to Florida, and there was the restrictions on, crossing the border and so forth. We had to be prepared for it. For us, a big, huge problem is cross-border in Canada to the United States and back and forth. That's certainly, commercial is still operating, but it's not operating as fast as it used to be. And it's spotty, it's intermittent. If you're trying to move anything hazardous across the border, it's chaos. And so it's certainly some challenges that I don't see any happening. And of course, Canada, the US, when that border hasn't been closed since anybody can remember in a century. So these are things that you never would have dreamed were going to happen, a few months ago, that's for sure.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I just had one other question, then we'll take a couple of questions from the participants that are on with us. But if anybody has any employees that are out of work and preparing to come back, is there anything that you guys are doing differently from people that have been gone and coming back? I know we talked a lot about some different safety things, but whether it's, I don't know what the examples would be, but Bill, maybe I'll start with you. Do you have any employees that are out that when you come back, you got to do something differently?
We touched on this before, what we do when they come back, but if they're out for a more extended period of time, some of them out for whatever reason, when they come back, they don't understand all the protocols we've put in place. They don't understand why they're in place. Normally, so we spend some time coaching them right off the bat about social distancing, and that's not just out on the street. It's something that we practice here. That they have to sanitize their area at the beginning of every shift. that taking your temperature at home isn't enough. You've got to go through the regular protocols to make sure this happens. And then the other thing that concerns us, especially right now, we are putting an extra emphasis on safety because we don't want anyone to have to go to any of the emergency rooms or anything like that. They're under enough stress. And additionally, we don't want our people exposed to whatever might be going on there because of something that's fairly minor. So even the smallest thing, we're asking them to take extra care.
Okay.
And really pay attention to what they're doing.
Sure. Anybody else have anything that if they've got employees out that are going to have to? I think good comments, Bill, about bringing them back into the new, whatever the new norm is. Anybody else have any insight for the members on that topic?
Yeah, John, I'll share specifically towards our folks who have been teleworking. Our plan is to allow a fair amount of time once the states we're operating in let their stay-at-home orders expire. But we're planning on, once that starts, bringing them back in very small groups so we can do the communication that Bill referred to, really intense training for those folks coming into the building for the first time in, what will be a couple months, orienting them to the new world and the new expectations, doing it in small groups, really being ultra diligent about that communication because it's so important. And frankly, the employees who have been at our facilities, they're scared too, right? They know that if people are coming back, we're introducing a different element. And
Sure.
So we're trying to address their concerns too and keep the right balance. Everybody's anxious to get back to what they think is normal, but we have to teach them what the new normal is.
Right. That's a good point. I think that's a good point for everybody to understand. Michael, I'm going to push it over to you. You've got a couple of questions from some of the attendees. If you want to ask the panel questions, feel free to do that. I think you've been trying to collect the questions and maybe consolidate accordingly.
Yep, I think we have time for one or two more. One question that came in for any of the panelists: what new protocols have you adopted to protect your staff on inbound freight, including UPS deliveries, for example?
Anybody have any specifics?
Anybody want to take that one?
I mean,
I'll touch on it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Bill.
Like I say, for us, it's something as simple as all of our receiving people are wearing gloves that they never wore gloves before, and then specific people are opening the packages and then taking the stuff and distributing it wherever it might have been, as opposed to before that box may have made it all the way through our facility. Now it stops completely in receiving.
Okay. Tom, maybe you had a couple things that.
Yeah, very, very similar to what Bill said. There's the personal hygiene practices that our folks who are receiving those packages, they really have really clearly changed their game. Also, just we're trying to limit the exposure too. So the employees who are involved in that have gone down to a very small number.
Okay. All right, Michael.
Okay, one more, just around communication. Do you think that customers may use chat features on your website instead of personal visits and phone calls? And then as a piggyback to that question, how are you communicating with any employees who don't have email, who may be working for you? Is that more of additional phone calls, or if anyone can speak to those 2 points?
Yeah, I can answer the second part of that question. We a fair amount of our workforce obviously does not have belt service email addresses, and where we haven't collected personal, we did get a texting app that we can use where we've been able to text links to any of the documents that we're sending out on on COVID and our policies and procedures and things like that. after this, I could probably get the name of that service we use, maybe give it to Michael, and he could probably publish it out. I'm sure other people, they're probably common to find or something, but they're effective ways to communicate. So even if you don't have a personal email address, you probably have a cell phone of most of all your employees, and a good way, effective, quick way to communicate.
Good. Appreciate that tip, Ken. Okay. Well, good. Appreciate the questions again from everybody. Michael, I think we just had one more slide, and we'll wrap this up, right?
Yep.
Okay. Just a reminder to everybody, once again, thank you for joining us. Just a reminder that we are right now planning full steam ahead for the convention. We are obviously thinking about some what ifs, but we put some contingencies in place already for potential cancellations if there are any, but just encouraging people to register and sign up for the convention. And I think the expo is now open for registration. So just encourage people to do that. We're looking forward to our time in Austin. We don't know what the new norm will be, but hopefully we'll be able to get together and just continue to network and share ideas and have a good time together. So just encourage people to do that. We appreciate it. I know there's, we can probably already feel from an international standpoint that there might be some impact, but let's do everything we can to continue to be part of this organization and association and have fun and plan for that convention. So thank you for that. And then I just want to thank Bill and Ken and Brian and Tim and Tom for your time today, for taking the time out from your own busy schedules and giving some input to our members. I really, really appreciate that. And I think we'll wrap it up from here. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
John.
Enjoy.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for putting together.
Yep. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.